Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look and installing the Curt Class 1 Trailer Hitch Receiver on a 2021 Chevrolet Spark. This is what your hitch is going to look like when it's installed, and taking a closer look, you're going to see it's an 1.25" receiver tube opening. So this is going to be a smaller size, so you're going to be a little bit more limited as far as your accessories, but on a smaller car like this, sometimes this is your only option. And in fact, I have a similar style hitch on my vehicle, which I can use for my bike rack, and it's really nice to be able to put a cargo carrier on there if necessary. Now, when putting those accessories in place, you're going to have a 1/2" hitch pin hole, and that's going to allow you to get your accessories in place. Now, the hitch doesn't come with a pin and clip, but a lot of times your accessories, when you pick those up, will come with one, so something to keep in mind. And if you wanted to get a locking version of a pin and clip, we actually have those available here at eTrailer. That way, when you have your accessories in place, you can leave them on the vehicle and have them locked in place so no one walks away with your accessory. Now, you're going to want to check your vehicle's owner's manual to see what the vehicle's actually capable of handling. Compare that with what the hitch is rated at and take the lower of those two numbers just to keep you safe. Now, a few quick measurements. Normally we measure from the center of the hitch pin hole to the furthest point of the rear fascia, and you're going to see that this is pretty much right at about flush at the receiver tube opening, but from the pin, you're going to look at about 2 inches. So that's going to be important for your folding accessories. That way they're not making contact with your fascia when they're in that stowed position. But this one sticks out far enough, you should be okay, but again, something you're going to want to check. Now, something else that's going to be important is going to be your ground clearance. So from the top of the receiver tube opening to the ground, it's going to be right at 1 foot. And that's going to be important, not because of the clearance of the hitch, but some of your suspended accessories, they're going to be sticking out. And so when your vehicle goes up an incline, those are going to want to dip down. So something you're going to want to think about while driving down the road, especially up hills or if you're on some rough terrain, maybe at a campsite, just keep that in mind while driving. Now, as far as the installation of the hitch, it's not too terribly bad. You are going to be enlarging some access holes to get some hardware up there, but as long as you have a rotary tool or a cutting device of some sort to just slightly enlarge them, you'll be able to get that up. And you'll be doing a little bit of trimming here on the fascia just to allow access for space for the receiver tube opening, but overall, it's not too terribly hard to do, and I'll be there to walk you through every step. So let's take a look at that install now. We're going to begin our installation on our rear bumper here, and what we're going to be doing is taking our 2 plastic clips off. There's also going to be 2 7mm nuts that are going to be going in here, and that's just going to allow us to kind of pry this bumper back and put the hitch where it's going to live, right behind the bumper. So to get these plastic clips off, I'm using a trim panel removal tool. This is pretty easy to just pry this out. A flathead's going to work just as well. There's a little slot here, you can slide it in, just pry that out, and then kind of go underneath the whole plastic push pin, and you should be able to get this out. Now, these little screws here are going to be a 7mm, so go ahead and get that. As you can see, some rocks and dirt are coming down, so if you're laying down doing this, just make sure you have some safety glasses to kind of protect your face from anything getting in your eyes. And also, during this whole process, make sure you hold on to all your hardware for reinstallation. Now, on our passenger side, we're going to see we have a bolt that has this little wiring bracket, and we're going to want to take this down because the hitch is going to live right here on the frame rail. So with the 13mm socket, we'll go ahead and take this out. You can go ahead and take the bracket, just kind of make sure that it's able to be moved. To get our hardware in to mount our hitch up, we're going to need to pass it through this little access hole. Now, as you can tell, the head on this carriage bolt is a little bit larger, so we're going to need to enlarge this. There's a few different ways you can do that. A step bit to get this through will work fine. I've also found that a Dremel, just using the wheel to kind of cut a nice little straight line or an oval here, can allow for that to pop in. But I recommend having this on hand as well as your spacer block, just to kind of make small adjustments as you're cutting, just to make sure that this pops in, and then once you have that clearance, you'll know that you've cut off enough. So I'll go ahead and get this widened out, and that way we can get our hardware in place. Now you can see I've just kind of took my Dremel wheel and kind of cut a straight line there, and that's going to allow this to pass in, and also our spacer block can go in there with no problem as well. So we're going to need to do this on the other side, so go ahead and repeat the same process on the driver's side. Now with the other side enlarged to fit our hardware, we don't want to put away our cutting device yet because we need to trim out a section here to fit our hitch. Now the instruction manual has this laid out and it's going to look similar to this. I've just used painter's tape to kind of create that spot just to follow some clean lines. So if it makes it easier, if you want to make sure that you don't make contact with the chassis, you can kind of pry this out and kind of get some cutting going on. So I'll go ahead, get these lines cut up, and then I'm going to go back with the file and just kind of smooth that out. So now we're going to get ready to fish wire our hardware up, and the holes that are going to be to the forward part of the vehicle, we're going to be using the smaller spacer block here and the shorter of the carriage bolts. So make sure that you grab the proper ones, as some of them are longer and the spacer blocks are also longer. So on these forward holes, passenger side only has one, but what we're going to do is take our coiled end here and we're just going to feed this up back to that hole that we enlarged. And we can take our spacer block and we can just feed this in the frame. And then we're just going to take our carriage bolt and just twist this on the coil. And if you're struggling to get that in, you can go ahead and feed the head in first like that. And that's going to get that in the frame as well. So once we push that through, we kind of jostle this around and we should have it like that. So again, leave this on here. So now we can go ahead and put the larger bolt and larger spacer block in the enlarged hole, and I'll show you how to do that. So now with this one, what we're going to do is take our spacer block and we can go ahead and just put this on our coil and just hold that in place. We're then going to just feed our carriage bolt onto those coils and put that up first, and then follow it up with the spacer block here. And this is a longer, tall one, so just try to set it in the orientation the same way kind of as the wire. It's going to make it a little bit easier to get this in place. You can see mine's kind of at a bad angle here, so I'm going to try to realign this for us. And there we go. And once in place, we're going to just pull that through. Now we're going to be repeating the same process on the other side, but we're going to have two of the smaller ones up front, and then we'll have our larger one out back. Now a little tip here on the driver's side, you're going to want to do the furthest one first. That way you're not having to feed over here. And sometimes when feeding it can kind of want to walk up in the frame rail. So if you need to, you can put a little bend, and that's going to kind of keep it down closer to the hole here. And then just take your finger, catch that coil, and then you should be good. So now we're going to get ready to put our hitch in place, and this might be a good time to grab an extra set of hands to do this. And what we're going to do is take our fish wires and we're going to feed these through the according holes that line up here. So just kind of feed those through. Now on the passenger side, it's going to need to slide under that bracket where we've removed that 13 millimeter. And you're also going to want to have this bolt ready with your lock washer and your flat washer here. So what we'll do is you'll be peeling this bumper back to kind of get it up in place first. And then just kind of raise it over the tabs. It might be tight here, but once over, that's going to kind of put that up in place. And then we'll take this portion here. We're just going to pull this tab down and kind of slide this hitch underneath it. So you may have to kind of move it around to kind of get it in place here. And then once we have that kind of aligned, we'll just take our bolt with our washers, and I'm going to get this hand threaded in. Now on the other side, my extra set of help is taking the fish wire off, and I'll show you what we're going to get these bolts hand tightened on, or the nuts hand tightened on, and that's going to hold our hitch in place. So you can pull this off or you can just untwist it. The main thing, you don't want to have this push back up in the frame rail. So if you can slide the hitch to kind of put pressure on it, or you can just take your finger and just kind of hold it in place as you get just a few threads started on here. Again, just being very careful not to raise this back up in the frame. And once you get that hand tightened on, you're just going to repeat the same process for the rest of the hardware. Now once all your hardware is in place, you're going to want to go back with a 3/4 inch socket and go ahead and just tighten these up. That's going to cinch the hitch up. Now you don't have to get too crazy here. You just want it snug because we're going to go back with the torque wrench and really get these torqued down properly. So just go through all your hardware, make sure it's nice and tight. Also, don't forget to tighten your 13mm bolt that you have here as well. So now going back with our torque wrench, I'm just using the torque settings that are in the instruction manual to get these properly torqued. And you want to make sure that they're not overly torqued because that can put stress on the threads, but also tight enough to not become loose over time. Now, all the torque settings for the hardware that we put in is going to be the same except for that 13mm. So definitely check the instructions to get those two different torque settings. That way you're not over torquing that small one. So we'll go through and get these all torqued properly. Now, if you need a torque wrench, we actually have these available here at eTrailer, or you can generally rent them at an auto parts store. But again, this is going to be an important step to make sure that it's properly installed. And then our last and final step is just to get our screws and our plastic push pins put back on our fascia. So now all that's left to do is take this out on the road and start using our hitch. And that was a look and installation of the Curt Class 1 Trailer Hitch Receiver on a 2021 Chevrolet Spark.